Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar using lighting design to tell a story presented by Jenny Bass. My name is Laura Lawrence and I'm the Global Marketing Director at Harman. Just a few things before we get started. Everyone on the call is muted to keep down noise levels during the webinar. However, there is a Q&A function where you can submit questions to the presenter and she'll try to answer as many questions as possible at the end. This webinar is being recorded and the link will be made available a few days after this presentation. We do have a number of other webinars taking place over the next few months for audio, lighting, video, and control, and we'd like to encourage you to take a look at the different webinars in our Learning Sessions workshop series that can be found on pro.harman.com. We're adding new sessions daily, and right now we have over 30 sessions scheduled for the remainder of the year, so watch for those on the calendar. And now I'd like to introduce you to Jenny Bass, the presenter for today's webinar. Jenny is a touring lighting director, designer, programmer, and technician. Throughout her career, Jenny has worked with a variety of touring acts, including the Avalanches, Mary Mack, Ray Sremmurd, Tanashi, and Earth, Wind & Fire. And now I'll pass it over to you, Jenny.
Hi, thanks, Laura. And thanks so much for Martin and Harman for having me. So this is using lighting design to tell a story. We're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about how do you set the mood of the whole show, and how do you heighten the drama of not only the songs, but kind of the whole show, the entire performance. Another way to think of this is, how do you heighten the emotion for each piece? How do you help the audience also, how do you give them signals to help them calm down, to help them focus on a certain point? And then we're also going to go through some different mediums that you can kind of draw on to get, to get inspiration for music, even if it's coming from a different art form. So the arc of a song, if it's a slow song, I find, depending on the song, less can be a lot more. Thinking of the big TV moments where it's this beautiful ballad, and then there's, the most emotional part of the song, and there's, just a gentle sweep, kind of thinking about using lighting to tell the story. And if the story is all coming from the music and doesn't need that much emphasis from the lighting, then kind of let that happen instead of always trying to do as much as possible. This can also cause things, the attention to be drawn to the right place, so that if there's a solo or if there's something like that, you can make that be the focal point. In a song, depending on the song, I try to start minimally as possible, so that as the song builds, there's somewhere for it to go. There are some exceptions, like if it's the song that everyone's been waiting for, and they kind of roll from one song to the other, and you want to keep, the tension going, the heightened things, but you still want to hold some things back. Even if you start with a big, start to the song, you still want to hold a couple things back so you still have somewhere to build. And using more movement and more color chases and that kind of thing can really add more, heightened tension to the whole song. So between songs, is the change too dramatic? Does it kind of, do people go from really high to like nothing? Or is that what you want? Like for a speech, if there is, like for this look right here, I would probably take all the white lights out, take the kind of extra lights out, and then maybe make it a little more toned down color choice, but not too fast. And also make sure that between one song and the other song, they look different, especially if you're rolling over. It's a really good signal to the audience that the song has changed. And even if you go between looks that are kind of, using the same color palettes, especially if, the artist wants a limited color palette throughout the whole show, make sure you're still making some kind of change, you know, so clear signals. Like if it's a red and blue song that goes to a red and blue song, maybe just your two main fixtures, switch them so that, you know, there's still an obvious change, even if it's in the same kind of world. And then if it is a color scheme throughout, how do you make that difference? You know, do you use accent, you know, different colored accent lights and that kind of thing, just so that there is a change between each piece. And the whole arc of the show. You know, just how within a song, there should, you know, be a build or change. Have that build throughout the entire show. So, you know, don't use all of your tips and all of your tricks that you've got in the first song, even if it is a really big song and one of the most famous songs that the artist has, so that they give a lot of energy to the audience. You still don't want to use every trick that you have. And because you are going from nothing, you know, that build will still be there, even if you're not using all your tricks. Yeah, and try to use, you know, especially, you know, some of the bigger movements or the flashier kind of things you have, try to keep that more towards the end. Or layer the tricks that you have, and then at the end use everything. And then also, if it does end on a slow song, like the Avalanches, one of their biggest songs was more ballady. So they still always ended on a slow song, but it was still very effective, because in the song before that, it was a big song, so I could use everything I had. And then for the slow song, it was, you know, just as dramatic, because the change between all of it to nothing still worked. And then if you have a lot of speeches throughout your entire show, make sure that you have, you know, something that really signals the audience, this is the in-between time. This is when someone's going to talk. One way to do this is have like a color change. So if it's like Lea Michele doesn't like as much kind of movement and that kind of thing. So, you know, and some of the pieces are more theatery. So you don't want you know, you're not going to have a big change where you can kind of, you know, have all the moving lights stop and then it's the speeches. So a color change, especially if you use kind of a consistent color palette for that kind of show, can really, you know, signal to the audience, this is the time that you're going to, you know, interact with the singer. It lowers the tension. It gives them a focal point for in between. Unless it's a time when they're just hyping the music, then I would try to, you know, stop movement, stop chases, stop all of that, because it is a calmer moment where you're actually supposed to be paying attention to what the artist is saying. If it is a DJ that's hyping the music, maybe there's something, you definitely don't want to stop the tension. You want to keep that building. But then at the same time, maybe you have something that accents those moments, so that you're working with the DJ and you're actually, you know, heightening what they're doing and making the moments where they're talking an even bigger moment. Also match the mood of the speeches. Like if there is a moment that's, you know, a lot of times an artist will dedicate the show to someone or talk about an issue that they've had that they want, you know, to share so other people can learn from it as well. And, you know, maybe make that moment in a different world. If they do have a lot of speeches and there is, you know, a color scheme throughout that, maybe make it a little bit different for that moment, so that you're giving, you know, back of the mind signals to the audience that this moment's going to be different. Also, you know, with each piece, what is the blackout going to be? What is, you know, like there was one in Lea Michele where it's a big theater moment and it ends with the big kerplunk, you know, and you want that to be a blackout because you want it to kind of accent exactly what she's doing. And then, you know, but if it is a kind of like rollover from one to the other, maybe you don't necessarily need a blackout, especially if they go from singing to a speech. You know, is that going to be more distracting than just kind of doing a color change and bringing everything down? And with drops, that is, you know, one of the greatest moments for heightening tension, obviously. You know, you want to find a good way to kind of build with that. And if you have, you know, a lot of DJs will do every you know, even if they have similar songs, you know, their famous songs that they're using, a lot of times they will, you know, they'll feed off the audience, and they'll have, you know, different timings each day. So how do you build a consistent show, you know, with it being able to do that? One technique that I use is I actually have a fader that I can match, that, you know, when I bring it up, the movement is more, or the spin of the gobos is more, and that kind of thing. So I can actually match what they're doing. You know, you get to know an artist better and kind of see where they're at and try to, you know, build with that. Because sometimes it's fast and sometimes it's, you know, a nice drawn out thing. And it's such a great thing to be able to match that every night. I really like to, you know, depending on, you know, there's different kind of drops, but the ones where, you know, it's building, 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 and then there's that moment of, you know, nothing. I try to black out during that moment so that I can really, you know, you take away all of the sensory. There's no music, there's no lights, you know, there's nothing to pay attention. All you have is that tension to kind of hold on to. And then when it drops, it just makes it that much bigger. One of my absolute favorites is when, or favorite kind of song to do, is when it's got a nice slow intro, and then it, you know, it has a beautiful drop. It just, I love that, because you can just, it's the best way to kind of build and release tension. And then you can have, I try to do minimal even if it's kind of building at the slow part of the song, so that when it does drop, it's that much bigger. And I always try to do like some kind of flash, you know, and there's nothing like hitting that moment and you literally see the audience bounce, you know. Drawing attention. So humans are naturally attracted to two things more than anything, and that is, you know, intensity and then movement. So, you know, if you do, like for this drum moment, each night, I try to do a nice sweep. So I could go like, you know, nice backlight, and then everything sweeps to the drummer during the big moment. Because there is a big moment where it's just this huge solo, and that's kind of the only thing going on. So, you know, the singer will literally move to the side, and all you can see is the drummer doing, you know, crazy hits and that kind of thing. And then for that, you can use intensity and the movement. A color change can also be a good way. So for this, you know, having it in like a red kind of backlight and then moving to white will also cause that intensity change, just, you know, from how the fixtures are made. And also using spotlight moves sometimes can actually be effective. Especially if you have limited spotlights. You know, a lot of times it'll be better to kind of, you know, do a fade out in between, but sometimes, you know, it can be effective just to do the big, you know, so that everything is right there. Some examples of drawing attention. One with color is that if you have like a nice jazz kind of piece going, you know, you still want to draw attention to the soloists. One example is I just did a Rhodes show, and they had 3 Rhodes pianos on stage. So when the solo starts, you know, if you've not heard the piece, if you've not seen the band before, you may not know, you know, it might take you a second to be like, who's soloing? So if you do a nice color change, like I tried to do, you know, if all the Rhodes had pink on it, then whoever was doing the solo would have white all of a sudden. So that, and do it right before the solo starts, so that, you know, everyone looks that way, and then it's a solo, and it's just a beautiful kind of moment. You kind of get that from theater. So in theater, if someone has an entrance, you want to start the light intensity going up right before they enter. so that the, especially if it's a dramatic entrance, maybe make the timing on that a little bit faster. So people literally, the murderer enters and then you sweep over before they're even in the door, and then they come out, and then it's a big moment. If everyone's looking over here and you don't have that intensity change, someone could come on stage and then half the audience doesn't even notice, and then they come, and you've ruined a very dramatic, what could have been a very dramatic moment. And this, you can apply that to soloists. If you have a big guitar solo, maybe bring up that light or bring up that spotlight a moment before they start the solo. So by the time everyone's turned to them, then they can go, and it's just so much more effective than there's a solo now, and then they're already starting it, and that's kind of the goal. It's not always easier said than done, but one of my favorite moments for kind of building tension and that kind of thing with this is EWF. They have this, really big bass solo moment, and he starts downstage and then he kind of moves upstage, and then with that, the designer had the lights downstage, and then as they moved, the entire kind of thing moved upstage, and it was just very effective with the movement to kind of, build with him and kind of move with him. Another way to draw, to kind of make it bigger than life, is to have a new trick, from lighting fixtures and that kind of thing that people haven't seen before. Even if they don't know lighting well enough to know that that's a new fixture and that's a new thing that it's doing, people notice when they haven't seen something before. And it really heightens the tension because they're like, this is cool, but I don't know why. And I try to save these moments for, one of the biggest moments of the show, or a moment where even maybe if it's calmer, if it's doing something which gives people, more of a way to just noticing that the lights are doing something special. An example of this is if you are using the new Martin lighting fixture, the Mac Aura PXL. It's a multiple source wash light. So there's kind of different ways that you can use that the audience might not have seen. Because it's a wash light that you can pixel map, you can actually, do a full stage like color chase, kind of like what you're seeing on the photo. And, the audience probably hasn't seen that before within the fixture, and, it can be so much more effective than just fixtures going. It's also twice as power of the aura. So having that kind of intensity with a color change can just be very effective. I haven't gotten to play with it yet, but I would love to see, a color chase with the zoom effect, going in and out, so that you can kind of create that psychedelic kind of thing, and, do with the pixel mapping just could be so effective. Especially if that's kind of all that you can see going on with some haze. Oh, I'd love it. So now we're going to go to the inspiration section, where we're kind of drawing on different mediums. These are going to be natural light, paintings, architecture. I'm not going to cover other concerts as much, but it's always good to see what other people are doing, especially when you can, be in the audience or standing behind the lighting designer. I love seeing, different effects that people have used, or different ways to program it. Like what I was talking about with I learned that from someone else, the quickness of, the drop being on a fader. I feel like everyone does something a little bit different, and it's so, which makes it so that you can always be learning. So natural light and street lights. It's great just to walk around and kind of see, during the day, or kind of a desk you can see here, how the different light is kind of reacting in the world around you. how you can layer light to make it more, dramatic, kind of like you're seeing here with the shadows, but then it's still kind of dusky. And fences are one of my favorite things. Just especially with street lights kind of, coming down at different angles that wouldn't naturally, may not be the same angle that it's coming down from the sun, would be from the sun, but it's still effective. The different patterns it makes on the ground. I used to take a lot of, go on walks and take a lot of photos, and, it's always funny when someone comes up on you and you're just taking photos of the sidewalk. And especially how it looks outside. One of my favorite things to do when I first started learning lighting, besides walking around and seeing how, different shadows were cast, was just to, sit down in a park at different times of the day and just take notes about how, how the sun was hitting people, how, dust looked, how is the blues and that kind of making the whole world, pop a little bit more. And how is it changing as well? And, seeing the different times of day, how does that feel? How does that make you feel? How does, how is the energy more? Is it calming down as the sun starts going down compared to, people playing in parks, midday? And paintings especially can be so effective. A lot of concerts will just be the flash and trash and that kind of thing, but not all of them are. Some of them are, carpets, and they're, it's like you've entered their little jam session and they want to make it more homey. So how can you use more, theater techniques to do that? And how can you, and how can you use paintings to kind of filter that? For example, if you are lighting it like a room, but you need more light, how do you, in paintings, it can be really effective, especially older paintings, studying how they make a room look lit in a time where they didn't actually have, room like lighting like we have now. But you look at it, and without analyzing it, it looks completely natural, but there's absolutely no way that there's, light coming from that angle, but they've done it so effectively, kind of drawing on that. And then also, how do they achieve this? And how can you also translate things like what you see in this painting here with uplight? It looks creepier, exactly that it's, a night scene, that maybe it's not the happiest moment and that kind of thing. And if there is music that's like that, if there is kind of intense music and you want it to seem a little creepier, maybe you do have some uplights, and maybe you have moments where, that's featured, and that's all that's going on is just this really intense, shadows going the wrong way look. It works because people aren't used to shadows going the opposite way, but they may not know that, which kind of makes it that much more fun. And then architecture. How do you use the natural architecture in, not just in as examples for your work, but also how do you use it for to accent, the space? How can you translate focuses on the architecture to really accent them? And then how do you use architecture to expand the space? Maybe sometimes bringing the audience more part of the show. And also using gobos on, on architecture to kind of make it pop that much more. And especially textured surfaces. You can maybe put a gobo and then a back in a wash light of different colors and really make the texture even more textured. And especially with set pieces, you can almost make wallpaper, and then change the wallpaper for each song. A nice strong gobo and then a fill-in color. And dance, especially if there's dance in the show, it can be just such a great, the kind of lighting can just be such a great way to kind of accent what's going on. If there's a lot of movement and that's kind of what you're catching, you know, especially if there is a dance moment, you can use side lighting to really accent the movement. Or even using backlight. If you want to, you know, like in the painting, if you want just like a silhouette of a dancer, you can, you know, maybe a little bit of side light, but then just a big backlight so that all you can see is how they're moving. And especially if there aren't very many dance parts in the show, you can really, by changing the direction of the light, you can really make it its own world, really accent it, really make it something that people remember, and vary kind of the perspective of how that's seen. Choosing color. Should there be moments where maybe this is the only time you use this color? Or maybe it's, you use layered colors the whole time. You know, you have a song that's red and blue and then, you know, a yellow and red song. Maybe there's one song where you just have it a little more matted, even though it wouldn't be, you know, different kinds of reds. Maybe like in this one right here, just to make it a different moment, different from the show, really, you know, telling the story of, you know, this is the heightened moment. Also, do you, you know, if there is a song that's about the sun, do you make it feel more sunny, or do you make it yellow so that it's like, this is the sun? It's kind of that choice of, do you want people to feel more excited, or do you want them to feel like it's a nice sunny day? What emotion are you using to, you know, how can you use the lights to evoke the feeling that you want the audience to have? If the song mentions a color, you know, if it's a bright blue day, do you want to use blue, or do you want to make the audience miss that color? You know, you're kind of building tension by not doing the expected, and then also sometimes it can be too cheesy. You can really, kind of what I mentioned before, you can really use color to heighten the space and, you know, accent different elements of the space. You can actually have a forced perspective too. If you have, you can start with a darker blue, especially like a big, a lot of tresses, really wide concert. You can kind of maybe start a little bit darker in the middle and then kind of just slightly lighter going out, and really, you know, vary the blues. It can give a forced perspective that it's, you know, the space is even bigger than it looks. You can also make different scenic elements pop. Everyone in the audience actually has a different perspective, because if someone is sitting down more, they're going to see a different perspective on the lights. And that's kind of something to keep in mind to kind of maybe heighten elements more. An example of this is there were some architecture lights in one of the venues that I went to, and only half the audience could really see that, because there was a big, because half the audience was above and then the other half was below. So the ones below, a lot of them couldn't see it. So you can kind of like heighten tension with that by using those. And then, you know, half of the audience is like, oh, and then the other half has that moment where they're like, what are they excited about? And what's kind of, you know, that different perspective you can use the audience to kind of, to help you, you know, tell a better story. How do you add these elements to kind of heighten the drama and the tension? If you are, like I said, the audience, and then the aging eye. Our eye over time, kind of, it gets more, it loses clarity. I'm just going to read this straight off because it's a quote. As our eyes age, the lens moves away from its younger pristine clarity towards something that is yellower and somewhat translucent. As yellow pigments accumulate in the lens slowly over time, so slowly that we don't notice it. And in the picture here, you can kind of see how the different ages see light differently. LEDs with narrow band additive mixing heighten this difference. So it's kind of finding ways to make it so that the whole audience is seeing as even a show as possible. Additive color lighting with as additive color lighting gets better with broader coverage and less missing colors, then the issue diminishes. In particular, to enhancement help this problem, use more colors of narrow band LEDs to fill in the gaps, or use broader band phosphorus converted LEDs. It makes the colors more for all audience, no matter their age. So kind of make it more what they're seeing already, so that they're used to, so that the differences that there already aren't heightened, if that makes sense. And kind of thinking maybe I skipped the examples. Maybe not. And then on to my thank yous. So I wanted to thank Brad, especially for kind of the new, like the aging eye and that kind of thing. Nick Peel, because he gave me a lot of the, when I was learning, he gave me a lot of the ideas for different perspectives to look on. And then also Mike Wood, because he wrote the article that I took quotes from, and Kenny Wright for the photo and his original work on that. And I also want to thank Harmon and Martin. And if you want to contact me, here's my contact info.
Wonderful. We do have some questions for you, Jenny, if you're open to them.
Yep.
All right. When you're thinking of the arc of a song or a show, how much do you consult with the band about the story?
It really depends on the artist. Some artists don't want to hear about it, and other artists, want to be involved. There's an element that they really want to accent. There's moments where, maybe you didn't realize that for them when they wrote it, it was about the guitar, so they really want, that person to be accented more or that kind of thing. And I feel like it's never a bad thing to know more of the story. And the more that you talk with them about it, the more that they can kind of engage with what you're doing as well.
Okay, the next question is asking, how much influence does the band have on the between song look?
It depends. I haven't actually had a band be that concerned with that element of it. They always tend to be more concerned with the songs. I think if there was stuff still moving when they were talking, they would notice. But part of that would be, I think the biggest element of that would be, do they want to see the audience or do they not want to see the audience? And that is something that a lot of times they will tell you right off the bat.
What is your favorite color combination that you like to use in most shows?
My favorite color combination is pink and green. Most people hate it. Green people don't look good under the color green, but it's my favorite color. And then it's contrasting colors pink. So that kind of gives the biggest pop between the two. So I really, I try to get it in if I can. For example, when I did Leah Michelle, they have one song that changes every night. So I'm like, there's no way I could possibly know. And they, that's a secret to everyone, even me. So that's the green and pink song.
Do you have an example of how you lit a DJ more theatrically?
Yeah, it depends. sometimes the DJ doesn't want to have light on them, especially. But one of my favorite things to do is to kind of like maybe just have flashes or have like lighter, have darker kind of lights or darker colors, and then for the drop, changing everything to white. I probably do that more than anything. And then also having the movement go from something small to something big. I love, especially if it's a punted show, I love if you release the pan and tilt. If it's a normal show, it looks awful, but in most circumstances. But if you release the pan and tilt, it just makes this crazy wave where wherever the lights were at, they're like, just this, yeah, and that really heightens that moment.
And how do you match colors to specific photos or artwork? Is there a secret to perfect color mixing?
Yeah, I would say something that's normally that I've never really had to think about it as much, because I would have like the artwork in front of me, and then kind of it's going to be different for different kind of LEDs. They don't all have the same color range. So kind of always have your, don't do it by memory, always have it right there so you can look at it, and then kind of which color you're kind of matching, because there's, most paintings won't have, just blue, just yellow. They're all going to have that gradient. So kind of first go through which one you like the most and then color match to that. It is interesting. Learning color theory, if it's not like a natural thing to you, can really, really help, kind of additive and subtractive. Then you at least know what kind of direction you're going, instead of just keep on, picking and choosing. And then also dial it in. Don't just pick on the color picker, but actually have like, have more of a movement, if that makes sense.
Okay, the next question is asking, what is your favorite console and what was your first?
Grand MA. Hopefully the 3 soon. I've only got to play on it a couple times, but right now it's a 2. And it just had, especially with music, it just has a lot of flexibility. I do really love the PRG console as well, especially if you're doing something TV and there's no way you can time code it and that kind of thing. It's got some really good functions. But yeah. And then my first console was kind of the Strand. I was kind of more the designer, but I still had to do kind of some stuff on it. But the first show that I was programming on was the ETC EOS, the one with those panels that kind of came out that it was supposed to be like the uncrashable desk. And I unfortunately figured out that if you like got one of the panels halfway in, then it did actually crash the desk. So one of my first times on the console, they left me alone with it for like 5 minutes and I crashed it. I was like, I don't know what I did.
All right, we have another question asking, what is your favorite eye candy fixture?
Ooh. Oh, I love the magic panels and the and that fixture that I showed you earlier. And then also the a lot of the Martin like spots just have like so many gobos that you can kind of make every song, have its own different look. But magic panels, I love the 360, because you can kind of show each LED and like make different, looks throughout, and then just have a moment where it goes crazy and people are just like, whoa. But I'm really excited to pixel map with the new Martin fixtures so that you can also have that moment where it's just, I've just not seen, so far, maybe someone's done it, but, the color chase with the crazy psychedelic look where the zoom goes in and out, there's just nothing like it.
All right, it looks like that was the last question. If anybody thinks of another question and they want to reach out to Jenny directly, her contact information is up on the screen right now. Jenny, thank you again for being with us. I think this was your third session with us. We really appreciate your continued support.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you all for attending. We do have an updated calendar out on pro.harman.com, so we look forward to seeing you on future sessions as well. Thanks, and have a great day, everybody. Bye, Jenny.
Bye.
Thank you, Jenny. Good job.
Thanks, Brad. Bye.
Bye.